welcome to Timeless with Julie Hartman Live. It is Tuesday, August 13th, 2024. I'm Julie Hartman, and it is great, as always, to be with you. 844-861-5537 is the call-in number. 844-861-5537 is the call-in number. And as always, you can use the chat as long as you keep it classy. And today you will especially want to use the chat because we have a guest on the show today. You know, yesterday I talked to you about my European sojourn, where I went to 7 countries: Italy, Malta, England, Ireland, Denmark, Romania, and Hungary. I said yesterday that it would take many episodes, perhaps a lifetime of episodes for as long as I'm doing this job, to unpack all of the spectacular intellectual, spiritual, and emotional growth that I underwent on that trip. But I have to tell you that one of the most impressionable experiences that I had was meeting my guest today. I met him in Romania. I had mentioned yesterday that I was speaking, among other places, at a conservative, anti-communist conference in Transylvania, Romania. And it was there that I met Alejandro Pena Esclusa, who I now feel so honored to call a dear friend. And I view him as a hero, not just in his home country of Venezuela, but a global hero for the cause of truth, beauty, and goodness, which I think and hope all of us, or at least those of us watching the show, hold dear. To give some background on Mr. Pena, he was actually born in Walter Reed Medical Hospital here in the United States, in Washington, D.C., but he is from Venezuela. He's a Venezuelan engineer, and he studied at the Venezuelan Higher Institute for National Defense Studies. Mr. Pena ran for president of Venezuela in 1998 against Hugo Chavez, who ended up becoming the president, or more accurately, the dictator of Venezuela from 1999 until his death in 2013. Mr. Pena faced immense political persecution because of his advocacy in his home country of Latin America. He founded Uno America, which was the first effort to counterbalance the Sao Paulo Forum. The Sao Paulo Forum we will be discussing today. I've done episodes on it here on Timeless. It was founded in 1990 by President Lula Inácio de Silva in Brazil, and also, who was the other one that founded it? The guy in Cuba, Fidel Castro, that's it. Sometimes it's hard as an American to get all of the names of these left-wing dictators in Latin America straight. But it is essentially an international group, which, to really cut to the chase, helps to steal elections in the continent of Latin America, and worldwide. But Mr. Pena founded Uno America to counterbalance the staggering power of the Sao Paulo Forum. Mr. Pena also led the first protests against Hugo Chavez's Venezuelan regime in 2001, and he was imprisoned in 2010 for an entire year in El Helioside, which is an internationally known detention center for political prisoners. In a minute, when we bring on Mr. Pena, I have no doubt that he will correct my pronunciation of the name of the prison where he spent a year. I may or may not have rehearsed the pronunciation with my Colombian producer before we came on the air, but I know that I butchered it. And now Mr. Pena is still a politically persecuted person. He had a really miraculous escape from Venezuela, where they not only imprisoned him, but suspended his passports. And now, thank God, he is living safely with his 3 beautiful daughters and his wife in Italy. I have right here on my set a book of Mr. Pena's. He's written several. This one is his most recent one about the Sao Paulo Forum. It's called The Electoral Frauds of the Sao Paulo Forum. He published it in March of 2023. Another spectacular book of Mr. Pena's is called Classical Art and Cultural Marxism. We have a photo of it here to put up. I don't have a hard copy yet. It is currently being delivered to my apartment from Amazon. And it's about the neo-Marxist movement and how it endeavors to leach into our psyche and into our culture through art and architecture. And in addition to all of these immense accomplishments, Mr. Pena is currently a leading expert for Latin America at the Christian Democratic Institute, as well as a senior fellow for the Center for Fundamental Rights. With that, we bring on Mr. Pena. Hello.
Hi, Julie. It's a pleasure to be with you. And thank you very much for that great introduction that you did.
Oh, well, I appreciate your kindness. I butchered, as you know, some of the Latin American names that I had rehearsed with my producer beforehand. But again, I have no doubt that you will correct me. And by the way, I just want to tell our dear listeners, because yesterday, Mr. Pena, I did this whole episode on some of my adventures in Europe. I mentioned at the beginning of this introduction that Mr. Pena and I met in Romania, and I want to show a photo of us next to our dinner one evening. Do our producers have this photo? I hope that we do. I sent it this morning. Yes, there we are. Do you see that, Mr. Pena? I know you know the photo. It's the two of us with our Hungarian goulash next to a rather graphic image of our dinner. But we just...
Yeah, I remember.
Go ahead.
No, it was a very good time, not only because it was a good food for the body, but it was also good food for the thoughts. Good ideas, good conversation. This was in Tusnad, in Transylvania, just in front of the Tusvanius festival that you were mentioning, a conservative, anti-communist festival, which is during the day, there's a lot of conference and book presentations, and in the night there is music and gatherings and wine tasting. So it's a very interesting festival, really.
It is. It's an intellectual conference by day and a total party by night, which was really unique. And I want to show a photo just quickly of Mr. Pena's speech at Tusvanius. This is a photo that I took of him, and he's speaking about George Soros and the Open Society Foundation. And it really was so providential how I met Mr. Pena. I was with Sophia van der Vecht of the Christian Democratic Institute, and we were just walking around Tusvanius, and she took me to his speech, and immediately I knew that we were kindred spirits, and I was so taken with his story and his immense bravery. So again, it's just an honor to know you and to be your friend and to talk about this very important subject here for two reasons. Because right now, we know that there is quite a situation, to put it mildly, in Venezuela. To give people some background who may not be familiar, there was a presidential election, I put in blinking quotation marks, at the end of July, just a few weeks ago. And the electoral authority of Venezuela ruled that Nicolas Maduro of the United Socialist Party, who has been the president of Venezuela since 2013, won the election. They said that he won with 51%, and the opposition candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, won 44%. Now, obviously, Venezuela does not have the most, shall we say, reputable track record of holding fair and honest elections. And so it is no surprise that many in the West have come out and said that actually it does not appear that the terrible dictator Maduro won. For instance, the vice president of the European Commission said, quote, Edmundo Gonzalez seems to be the winner of the presidential elections in Venezuela by a significant majority. The opposition, Gonzalez's campaign maintains that he won with 67% of the votes to Maduro's 30%. Also, Brian A. Nichols, here an American of the United States State Department, said, quote, the evidence is overwhelming that Maduro did not win the election. Now, obviously, you, Mr. Pena, have very close experience with this. A final thing I'll say before I will be quiet and kick it over to you for all of your wisdom, but just to really set the scene here is that, in addition to this election that's going on in Venezuela, obviously here in the United States, we have our own election coming up. And we Americans sometimes tend to think that these events are unconnected. But we know that here in 2020 in the United States, there was great reason to believe that the election was rigged. That's different from saying that it was stolen, but certainly it was rigged. And I've done many shows on this program showing forth that evidence. Zuck bucks, the rigging of social media through Twitter, among other entities, the privatization of election procedures. But coming up in 2024, I know many Americans are very worried about the state of our elections, which is why Mr. Pena wrote a book on the very subject. So before we get into that, Mr. Pena, can you please just provide us with a background on you? I gave the introduction, but please tell us your story, especially of your imprisonment. And how did you get out of prison?
Well, I will make it short because probably the most important is the question you asked about the electoral fraud in Venezuela and the relation to that fraud to the American elections, because there is a link. I'm a mechanical engineer. I've been in politics for 40 years now, and from the beginning, when I was presidential candidate in 1998, when Hugo Chavez won the election, I denounced the links of Hugo Chavez with Fidel Castro, communist Cuba, and also the link of him to narco-terrorist groups in Colombia, the guerrilla groups that finance themselves with drug trafficking. So I started to denounce this, not only in my country, but also internationally. I was the first Hispanic American to write a book on the Sao Paulo Forum. Sao Paulo Forum, as you said, was created by Fidel Castro and Lula da Silva right after the fall of the Berlin Wall, in order to substitute the support that communist groups were having from the Soviet Union, in order to change that, because that support, they did not receive it any longer, for let's say, self-supporting group articulating all the left in Latin America. So I was the first that wrote about this in Spanish language. I wrote about 4 books on this matter, and I started to travel, not only around Latin America, but also in Europe and the United States, denouncing and warning about the dangers of the Sao Paulo Forum. This, of course, cost me persecution, jail for 1 year, as you said, and exile. But now I'm active again, because for 10 years I couldn't write, I couldn't speak, I couldn't give interviews, because I was free in my country, but let's say with many conditions, conditions that imposed by the quote unquote justice in Venezuela. So I could not write, I could not warn people of the dangers that we were experimenting in Venezuela, because this process that we lived in our country, I want to say this, is exportable. It's a model that can be exported. Not only the dictatorship itself, which has been growing in all Latin America, but also the methods, including the method of electoral fraud. So let's say that's a small resume of myself regarding to the Sao Paulo Forum. And if you have patience with me, Julie, I will say just a few words.
Of course,
about the
please,
fraud.
please.
2 days before the election, I was in Tushnat still in the Romanian festival. You already have left because you had a meeting somewhere else in Ireland, or I don't know where. And we have a dinner. We had a dinner in Tushnat. There were many people there, Hungarian important people, former BBC reporter, people from, well, Sofia van der Weg was there, many people. And I warned that Nicolás Maduro would commit a major fraud in Venezuela 2 days later, that is the 28th of July. And this is exactly what happened. He committed a major fraud. And when Edmundo González, the opposition candidate, says that he won 67% to 30%, that is almost by 40 points, is not an opinion, no. It's not something he thinks, no. The opposition led by a very courageous woman. Her name is Maria Corina Machado. She's the most important opposition leader in my country, Venezuela. She organized, um, let's say, a method to obtain all the official tally sheets of every voting center in Venezuela.
Wow.
She did not, she wasn't able to get 100%, but she got around 83% of all the voting centers in the faraway places in Venezuela, far from the city. It was a very intelligent, very well conceived plan. And this, I wanted to tell you, Julie, and all of us, all of you that are listening to us, all of you can see these tally sheets. All you have to do is enter into a website. Of course, I can say it in English, but maybe we can write it later, and you can show it to your viewers or your listeners. Julie, it's www.resultadosconvenezuela.com, and if you get there, you who are listening to me now will be able to see with your own eyes every tally sheet of the result, official results. The thing is, this was not done by the government or by the electoral authorities, because they're rigged, they're perverted, they work for the dictatorship. This was done by the opposition. These are official results. So Edmundo Gonzalez, the winner, can say with a strong voice that he has the proof that he won. So now there's a turmoil in my country because the population knows that Maduro lost the election by a landslide, and he wants to stay in power. How? Killing people, putting people in jail, persecuting, repressing, a bloodbath. This is what's happening now in my country. I believe that he will not be able to stay because the evidence is so strong against him. But it's a difficult situation that my country is experimenting right now.
Help us understand how the Sao Paulo Forum facilitates these heists, how it enables someone like Hugo Chavez or Nicolas Maduro to get into power. You know, we Americans up until now can't really conceive how that happens. Also, I just want to quickly read for the listeners your first paragraph of your book, which I think very aptly summarizes the Sao Paulo Forum. You say the Sao Paulo Forum is undoubtedly the most powerful political force in Latin America since, at the time of this writing, it has 11 sitting presidents among its ranks, something that no other international movement had achieved in the past. So we're going to talk about how this relates to the United States, but first, just help us understand. There are 11 sitting presidents in Latin America that are a part of this forum. How do they facilitate these heists with stealing the elections for their leftist candidates?
Well, the secret they have, and that they are exporting it to the United States, let me tell you that, Julie. The secret is that they don't care about sovereignty, about sovereign nations. They work together, they meet, and these people, they make plans about every country where they govern. But instead of doing it, let's say, nationally, independently, a guy from Venezuela, for example, Nicolas Maduro, has an opinion that can be, it can be turned into public policy on the situation of Chile or in Brazil. That is, they work together, they share money. For example, in the case of Hugo Chavez, he financed most of the candidates of the Sao Paulo Forum in Latin America, which is something illegal. He used Venezuelan money coming from oil sales to finance most of the candidates in Latin America. That is illegal. That is an external government interfering in the internal affairs of other countries in order to decide who's going to win the election. And then they share the little tricks. For example, the first electoral fraud done by the Sao Paulo Forum was in Venezuela in the year 2004. This is written in the book you have in your hand, Julie. The importance of this book for your listeners is that this book is published in English. So you can read it. It's very easy to read. It's a manual. It's written in very, let's say, understandable words, very easy paragraphs. And this can be ordered through Amazon. So you can read it. But what I say in this book is that the first fraud that I know of was committed in 2004 in Venezuela. And then it was exported. The same method was exported to other countries. And I have enough elements to say that the people who committed the fraud in Venezuela in the year 2004, who were the owners of a software electoral company called Smartmatic, they were related to elections in the United States as well. Why? Because they bought Sequoia voting system. I don't know if you've heard about this company, Julie, but it's a very important electoral company in the United States. And then Sequoia was bought by Dominion voting system. You might remember that name. You might recall that name because of the 2020 election. So there is a direct link between Smartmatic, Sequoia, and Dominion. I know that what I'm saying in this program is very little information, but I expect that those who are listening to me now, maybe they can do some homework or read it in my book, or you can just in internet see the relation between Smartmatic, Sequoia, and Dominion. And this week, what day is today? Well, let's say 4 days ago, the president of Smartmatic, who is a Venezuelan, was indicted in the United States for bribing the electoral authorities of the Philippines. So what I'm saying here, to put it in short words, is that the method of electoral fraud developed in Venezuela 20 years ago has been exported to all 5 continents, including Africa, including the United States, including Asia. So I believe that the American population should understand more about the Sao Paulo Forum, because this is not something happening in a very far place in Latin America that has nothing to do with the United States. No, on the contrary, it has a very close relations to things that happen inside the United States. I mean, if we have a little bit more time, I explain more about this.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about right now, because I know that people are curious how all of this connects. And, in America, we think that when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1990, that communism just ended. The threat of leftism just went away. That's absurd, but I'm telling you, that's, as an American myself who came up in this country in our school system, that is what we are taught. So it's very important for us to understand this global left-wing movement, especially in Latin America, and how it connects with the burgeoning electoral fraud that we're seeing here in the United States. So we're going to talk about that right now. But first, quickly, I want to tell you about Priority Gold. We know that economically and globally, things around the world are very uncertain. And that's why you may want to consider tying your assets to something physical. Economists are warning us about massive tax hikes here in the United States that could affect our IRAs and 401ks hard. With inflation rising and global uncertainty, it's no wonder that central banks and many Americans are turning to gold. If you haven't thought about gold yet, now is the time, and you should consider Priority Gold to help you diversify your savings with gold and silver. Text GOLDEN to 1-800-405-GOLD for a free gold information guide and see if you qualify for free shipping and storage. Experts agree that physical gold is one of the best ways right now to fortify your savings. Act now to get your portfolio working for you, while the market, at least for now, is golden. Text GOLDEN to 1-800-405-GOLD. That's text GOLDEN to 1-800-405-GOLD. So, Mr. Pena, as I had mentioned, and you know this very well, in 2020 here in the United States, many of us felt like the election was rigged. And even if you said that or dared to even go there, you were called an election denier, a conspiracy theorist, a white nationalist, anti-democracy, et cetera, et cetera. But there were many pieces of evidence, as I had mentioned earlier in the show, which pointed to the fact that there was some shady business, shall we say, going on from many different angles. I had mentioned Mark Zuckerberg gave $450 million to privatize election procedures. There were big lawyers like Mark Elias who had a sue and settle strategy, which watered down signature requirements, for instance, in states. There were these videos, for instance, in the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia, of them sending the poll workers home at 10 p.m. And then there's footage of the ballot counters pulling out boxes and running them through the machines. Obviously, we know that there was massive big tech censorship of conservatives through entities like Twitter and Meta. And now, as we're approaching the 2024 election, many of us are just kind of bracing for impact. We don't know what they're going to do, but we know that they're probably going to do something. And if you dare to call it out, you're going to be silenced. When we were together in Romania, you referenced the situation in the United States several times. Help us understand how this connects with the Sao Paulo Forum. Is the Sao Paulo Forum working with George Soros's Open Society Foundation? And, just kind of help us figure out how all these entities fit together, or even if they do.
Well, first of all, I would like to clarify that when I make these warnings or denouncings, my objective is not to induce fear in the population because this is so evil, so complicated. And that's not my objective. What I try to do is to warn about these dangers so they can be neutralized, as we Venezuelans neutralized the fraud in Venezuela the 20th of July. Maybe the people from the Trump campaign can learn a little bit of what we did the 28th of July to avoid the fraud. But yes, there is a relation. People from the Sao Paulo Forum belong to an organization created by Senator Bernie Sanders. The name of this organization, you can look it up, is called the International Progressive. Very easy to look it up. It's in the internet. Find Progressive International, and then look who belongs to the directive, to the committee, to the council. And you will find there people working with Bernie Sanders that also belong to the Sao Paulo Forum. For example, the Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, who advocates for the legalization of drugs everywhere he goes. Then you have the Álvaro García Linera. I know these names might sound complicated. He was a vice president. He's a member of the Sao Paulo Forum, and he was a vice president of leader coca grower Evo Morales, who was president of Bolivia and who also committed electoral fraud in the year 2019. And then you have Rafael Correa, a corrupt, who is being wanted by the Ecuadorian authorities. He's also belongs to the Sao Paulo Forum, and all of them, a few others, work together with Bernie Sanders of the Democratic Party and the International Progressive. On the other hand, the company I mentioned a few minutes ago, Smartmatic, created in Venezuela, with the passing of time, was headed by a British man, a lord. His name was Lord Malloch Brown. Lord Malloch Brown was the leading executive of George Soros' Open Society. So this company, Smartmatic, that committed fraud in Venezuela in the year 2004 and exported its method to other countries, finally got related to George Soros. These are the things that must be investigated. But let me end this part of my explanation proposing that the method we used the 28th of July in Venezuela to discover the fraud, this method can be implemented in the United States as well.
Yes, tell us.
The day of the elections. It's very simple, but it needs to be worked out, and it needs a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of people. The secret is to have witnesses or members of the voting centers, people who have served from the civil society, in every voting center in the United States, in every voting center, in every state. And those people must stay there until the electoral process closes, and make sure that they obtain a copy of the tally sheet. This is legal. This is mandatory to give tally sheets or copies of the tally sheets to the parties that are participating in the election. These tally sheets must be collected, scanned afterwards, they must be scanned, and then they must be uploaded in a powerful, let's say, robust, difficult to hack website for the population to see every tally sheet, and for the Republican Party to have the proof of the results, and not expecting the announcement of the electoral authorities. They have to have copies of every tally sheet to make sure that the results are not altered, are not tampered with.
You know, it's very encouraging to hear that there is, in fact, a solution, or there are things that we can do in order to stop the steal, as people say. And I used to really dislike that term, because even to me in the United States, it sounded so conspiratorial. But we Americans think we're somehow insulated from a lot of the realities that happen all around the world. We think, oh, people steal elections in Latin America or in the continent of Africa, or in communist China and Putin's Russia. No, it can happen to us here too. So it's very encouraging to hear that there are things that we can do. But, I do wonder, Mr. Pena, not to sound so pessimistic, but in this age of big tech and AI, and, there's so much massive manipulation. People can make videos of things that didn't happen, either for the Republican side or the Democratic side. People can, invent things that candidates said or didn't say. It's quite unnerving. Do you worry about that at all? The way that AI and technology can help be a potent accelerant to some of these electoral fraud measures?
Well, I worry more about the owners of some of these big tech companies, because they are obviously, they have an ideology. So instead of using the technology for good in a neutral way, they use it to promote their ideology, which is mainly globalist, pro-abortion, pro-gender ideology. It's an ideology, a globalist ideology, that is being assumed by some of these big tech companies or executives. This was very clear to me in the year 2020, when they took away Twitter not from the candidate Donald Trump, no, from the president of the United States. That was incredible. And then when there were hearings in the Congress, the owner of Facebook and of other big tech companies, they admitted the relations with the CIA, with the Democratic Party. These big tech companies should not work for anybody or for any ideology. They just should provide a service. And this is worrisome, and something must be done, because they have the power to manipulate opinion.
Speaking of big tech, as you know, yesterday there was a historic interview between Elon Musk, who thankfully bought Twitter in order to do what you just said, make it a forum irrespective of ideology, a place for free speech, between Elon Musk and former President Donald Trump. And interestingly, I read this morning. Truthfully, I didn't watch or listen to the full interview, but I read this morning, Mr. Pena, that former President Trump referenced Venezuela a few times. Did you know this? I have
Yes, yes.
I have the quote right here. He said, and I wish we could have gotten the audio of it, but I believe that still there are some problems with getting footage of that interview because of all of the subversion efforts that were underway to try to censor that interview. But this is the quote from former President Trump. He said to Elon Musk, quote, "If something happens with this election in 2024, which would be a horror show, we'll meet the next time in Venezuela because it'll be a far safer place to meet than our own country." Okay, so we'll go, he continues. You and I will go and we'll have a meeting and a dinner in Venezuela. Former President Trump then went on to talk about how he says Venezuela is sending many of its criminals to the southern border to come across into the United States. How do you react to President Trump's comments?
Well, I think President Trump has it very clear that there is a dictatorship in my country. And I should say also, I didn't say it before when I talked about the Sao Paulo Forum, that this political organization has become as well as a criminal organization. They are related to drug trafficking. Well, for example, the president of my country or the dictator of my country, Nicolás Maduro, still today has a $15 million reward on his head because he's the chief of the cartel of the Suns, one of the most powerful drug cartels in the Western Hemisphere. And he is the dictator of Venezuela. So I think Donald Trump, he's aware of all of this, and he's also aware that our government or our dictatorship is related to criminal groups, and they use these criminal groups in other parts, including the United States, to export their method. Because, as I said from the beginning, all the tricks that the Sao Paulo Forum has developed in order to control power and stay in power indefinitely, they are exportable methods that can be implemented in any country, including the United States.
You know, in our final few minutes, I know that a lot of Americans are very fearful of what you just said. More and more of us are aware of these efforts to, as you say, export electoral fraud, among many other evils, to the United States. And it's not just that things are being exported. We have many homegrown domestic problems here. I know Americans are quite fearful about our future. And, you know, one of the great joys of meeting you, Mr. Pena, in Romania and then again in Hungary was talking about your worldview and how you are able to be such a happy, healthy person and a fighter, even with all that you've been through. And if you're comfortable, I didn't mention this, but I imagine that you're open about this. You spoke with me, and I'm hoping maybe you'll share with the audience your experience being in prison and having cancer. Could you just talk to us a little bit about your worldview and give us some kind of wisdom of how all of us should try to view the presence of evil in our lives and prepare for, hopefully not, but perhaps a bigger showcase of evil than any of us are used to?
Well, my worldview on this matter is very simple. I believe in God. He is powerful, he exists, and all we have to do is do our little part as human beings that are weak, that are mortal, but God is all powerful. And we must believe what Christ said to St. Peter about the final triumph of good and the final defeat of evil. So we must believe in that in our heart very strongly. And all we have to do is fight. As Donald Trump said, fight, fight, fight. That's all we have to do. And put the rest in the hands of God. That is, we have to pray, but we also have to fight. And we have to be joyful when we fight for good, because we know that what we're doing is right. And when you fight for something that is right for your country, for your family, for justice, then you're happy because you know that you're doing something that is correct, that is something important that it gives meaning to your life. So what I would suggest to all the Americans that are listening to us, as you said, I was born in the United States. I graduated in high school in the United States. I love the United States. I lived there. So I became acquainted with so many Americans that I feel very close. So I would recommend to continue fighting and to trust not only God, but the goodness that is inside the American people, the majority of the American people. And we have to trust with all our heart that evil will be defeated at the end. When? We don't know. How? We don't know. Because God is the Lord of history, not us. But if we fight hard, that's enough to feel happy, and that's enough to have a meaning in your life.
Thank you for that. And you made such an impression on me, because one of the things that we talked about in Hungary was that the thing that got you out of prison was the fact that you had cancer. Please correct me, of course, if I'm misstating this or I'm not recalling this correctly, but you developed prostate cancer before you were imprisoned in 2010. And it was the fact that you had cancer that got you out of prison, because Hugo Chavez, the president of Venezuela, who imprisoned you, also had cancer. And from what I understood from your story, people were pointing out the discrepancy and going, hey, wait a minute, you, the president of Venezuela, have cancer, and you have a political prisoner in prison who also has cancer. You're not allowing this person to get cancer treatment. And you told me that that was the thing that got you out of prison. And it was so interesting what you said. You said, I mean, we were just talking about this, and you said, Julie, I'm so lucky. God helped me. God gave me cancer to get me out of prison. And I thought, this guy, he's saying he's so lucky that God gave him cancer to get out of prison. But this is how it works in life. This is how God works in your life at times.
Well, it's not that God gave me cancer. I developed cancer because we're humans and we're weak, and we have different illness. And some people have one kind of illness, other people have other kind. But the thing of God is that He uses the things that happen in humanity, not because He brings them or He causes them, because God never creates or causes bad. He gives us liberty to do evil or to do good. And since we have a weak body, well, it's not His fault, because He gave us liberty. We develop different illnesses. So it's not His fault, but it was let's say, a miraculous coincidence that I had cancer and Chavez had cancer, and that coincidence got me out of jail, besides all the international pressure that there was to get me out of jail. A lot of pressure.
Well, we're so happy that you're safe. And I'm, again, so honored to know you and to have spent time with you and your beautiful daughter, Angelica, who's a pastry chef, by the way. She may be embarrassed that I'm talking about her, but she's become a dear friend of mine, too. And boy, for all that you have to say about your worldview with what you've been through, your 3 daughters and your family have been through immense suffering and evil. And they have taught me a great deal about really how to walk forward with the armor of God, fighting for truth, beauty, and goodness. So thank you for your example, Mr. Pena. Thank you for coming onto the show. And as a reminder to everyone, Mr. Pena's book is called The Electoral Frauds of the Sao Paulo Forum. We linked the website that he had mentioned in the chat if you're interested. And also, please do check out his book, Classical Art and Cultural Marxism. As I mentioned on the show yesterday, and as you know, Mr. Pena, I spoke at Oxford for the Roger Scruton Legacy Foundation, really kind of about this very subject. And this was before I even met you and knew that you wrote a book on it. So we'll have to have you back on to discuss that. But thank you so much again.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I wish you the best, Julie. Very happy to have been with you in your program. And I also wish the best for all the Americans. And I hope you have a big victory in the next elections. But it must be hard work also.
That's right. A big, honest victory. A big, honest victory, whoever it is, as long as it's honest. Thank you, Mr. Pena. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.
And before we go, my friends, I again want to tell you about Priority Gold, because right now with all of our volatility, it really is prudent to try to tie, your assets to something physical. As I said, economists are warning that massive tax hikes could hit your IRA and 401k hard. With inflation rising and global uncertainty, it's no wonder that central banks and many Americans are turning to gold. If you haven't thought about gold, now is the time. And you should consider Priority Gold to help you diversify your savings with gold and silver. Text GOLDEN to 1-800-405-GOLD for a free gold information guide and see if you qualify for free shipping and storage. Right now is a really good time to get physical gold. It's one of the best ways to fortify your savings. Text GOLDEN to 1-800-405-GOLD. Again, that's text GOLDEN to 1-800-405-GOLD. And I'm going to tell you, just to add on, about MyPillow, because in addition to gold, you want to sleep well, you want to walk well, you want to towel well, and you should consider getting MyPillow while a lot of these products are at a massive discount. MyPillow is made with patented and adjustable fill. It adjusts to your exact individual needs regardless of your sleep position. It's true. I sleep on a MyPillow. I know this. And you can also get their 6-pack kitchen or bath towel sets for only $25. Their brand new mattress toppers for as low as $69.98, and their famous MyPillow bed sheets, which I also sleep on, for as low as $25, and so much more. Go to mypillow.com or call 1-800-566-6745 and use the promo code Hartman to get big discounts on all MyPillow products, including the premium queen size MyPillows for only $19.98. That's the lowest price ever. Take advantage of this while the discounts are high. Use promo code Hartman at checkout. 1-800-566-6745 or go to mypillow.com. Thank you for being here. By the way, so sorry. Hello, Sean. I didn't introduce you at the beginning, but I went straight to Mr. Pena. But he is here. He is not queer.
I don't
he is
want to
not
tarnish.
coming for your children.
I do not want to tarnish this beautiful episode with this. Please. What a beautiful man.
He is.
What a great interview.
He is. Well, thank you. And really, just, it's so important to learn about the electoral fraud, but also to encounter someone like him with his worldview, with all that he has been through. Battling cancer is enough in a lifetime. Then, running for office, being imprisoned, having his passport be suspended from him from Venezuela. He and his family had to flee in the mountains of Venezuela in order to get to Colombia, where there they faced persecution. And then finally they escaped. This photo you're seeing is of him being arrested in 2010. And finally they escaped to Italy, where they live now as political refugees. And you can see how lovely and gracious and easy and calm he is. But we in the United States think we're victims if someone misgenders us. On that note, I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much for being here. You can email me at julie@julie-hartman.com. I love hearing from you. Take care. I'll see you soon.